I really think that the Afghan and Iraqi situation is being held over for the Iran war especially. This is what's going to justify all of those troops being there as they mass. It's mostly going to be an aerial attack, I think, on Iran, but there will be some troops justified for staying in the region because even if they take out all of the infrastructure, military infrastructure in Iran, it still becomes a seething pile of Muslims that are just going to have so much hatred for the West that all of our soldiers are going to be risked in this whole region. And
then we may have real attacks, which the globalists will then use to clamp down on the American people. So clearly, you're right, they have encircled Iran for that purpose. What's the time frame from your intel on the strike on Iran?
Well, I think it's going to be this year. They're still looking for a provocation, a justification of it, but I think it's going to be this year. Relative to your question about what I think about the Third World War and when one of these trigger events is going to go off, I think it's probably going to be an attack of North Korea on South Korea in earnest, to which the U.S. has to respond, probably with tactical nuclear weapons. They have such an overwhelming majority of troops there that we cannot stop them, and all of our 26,000 U.S. troops will be at risk. I think 2005, there's a 2015, 50-50 chance it could happen, but more likely almost toward the end of the decade because China won't be ready till then.
All right, Joel, hold on. Do 5 more minutes with you if you can. I want you to have 5 minutes to really walk through this scenario slowly. We'll be right back. We got about 4 minutes left with Joel Skousen, a World Affairs Brief. If you just joined us, he was getting into his global strategic worldview from studying the globalists that I think is very accurate from my own research. I concur with much of what he's saying. I think that's the general direction that the global power blocks are moving. In 4 minutes, sum up the next 8 years, as you say, and where the hot spots are and what this overall plan is by Foundation X.
Okay, before I get into that, I just want to make a clarification. When I said, when do I think they're going to attack Iran, when I said this year, I didn't mean 2010. I mean in the next 12 months.
Yes.
Because this year is almost through. Going back to this general scenario, remember that Russia is running this show. China is going to be tagging along as the ally to back up Russia in its nuclear attack on the West. China wants to play the role as not the primary attackant because it wants to position itself to be the Cold War opposer of the West after it becomes the ally of the West during the war. It's like Russia. Russia comes in and helps the West beat Germany and then becomes the new Cold War enemy and gets all these concessions from the United States in the process. That's what China is setting itself up to. So China will be careful not to appear to be too much of the enemy, even though they will take, I think, when this war starts, the Pacific in order to guard the rear of Russia. And then from that position, they'll attack Russia sometime during the war so that the West can win the war against Russia. Then it will be the West versus China. That's the big picture. Now, in doing so, I don't think that China will do ravaging attacks on Japan, the Philippines, Australia, New Zealand. I think they'll occupy or encircle to keep them contained, but will not do a lot of damage so that when they switch sides, they won't be viewed too much as the enemy. Now, in terms of timing, we have to watch Russia because Russia is the one that's calling the shots here. Right now, the West is in the middle of giving everything away to the Russians. In NATO, for example, doing a joint military missile defense with Russia, Russia says, we'll cover your east, and you take up the missile defense in Western Europe itself. What they're doing, and this is very, very interesting, they're saying, we'll put our own missile defenses in here to guard against Islamic, rogue missile attacks. But they're taking the prime position to be able to use anti-ballistic missiles to keep Western anti-ballistic missiles from shooting down their own missiles in their boost phase by taking the Near East position. I don't know if I'm being clear what I'm saying verbally here. But it's very, very important for the West to understand that the French, who are now driving the agenda in NATO, are completely selling out to the Russians.
Why, just for natural gas, or?
No, it seems to be part of the globalist agenda.
Sure,
the natural gas is being driven by the
EU has been called by Lord Monckton and many others properly the new Soviet.
That's right. It is a new Soviet, and they're basically, it's really a control of who's going to run this new world order. The Russians want to run it. The Anglo-American establishment know that they intend to run it, and they have to eliminate Russia in the process. But they're in the process of luring Russia in and getting it to be confident enough to attack the West. That's been the West problem all these years, is trying to get Russia over. That's why the disarmament. That's why taking out our MX missile, even when they reneged on theirs.
Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the sites, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.